Hello and welcome to the on-demand recording of the second in the SunGuard 2020 webinar series on infrastructure as a service. This webinar is entitled The Business Case Roadmap. We're joined today by a panel of experts, including Miles Cunningham, Head of Solution Architects at SunGuard Availability Services.
Good afternoon.
Stuart Brown, Cloud and Virtualization Expert at SunGuard.
Good afternoon.
Barry Turner, European Managed Services Market Manager from Cisco.
Good afternoon.
And Max Cooter, Editor at CloudPro, the UK's first dedicated cloud publication.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. So let's begin. The beauty of developing a business case-driven roadmap to the cloud rather than a technology-driven one is that specific events and conditions can provide very clear triggers for migration. So this discussion is going to explore some of the key events that are prompting organisations to embrace infrastructure as a service. Gentlemen, rapid deployment and innovation seem to be emerging as fairly consistent business value themes for cloud infrastructure. So what types of applications would provide a good starting point?
Well, if I pick that one up to begin with, what we're finding is that companies are getting a huge driver to adopt a cloud service, but not entirely sure where to start. So what they're tending to do is that we've got a new application that we want to drive out to business, we've got a new market, we've got a wider user reach. So what they're doing is that they're now adopting sort of cloud services as the first sort of footprint or first method to get themselves onto that sort of journey into sort of further transition for themselves. I don't know what you think, guys.
I think that's right. I think they're starting with one discrete project or one discrete application and moving that and seeing how it goes. And that's the typical way that people are going to make a start in the cloud, move to cloud services.
Absolutely. Nobody's got any idea what the uptake's likely to be, either internally or externally, and therefore provisioning platforms to be able to correctly scale and size something is very hard. So the cloud makes it perfect.
Yeah, I think the other piece on that is it enables organisations who see using a cloud compute service as being somewhat risky and new. By moving one application to the cloud, it enables them to trial that and test it and build up their own confidence in that methodology and the architecture.
Yep.
So in addition to greenfield applications, there's a growing popularity for mobile apps driven by consumers but also now by enterprise. And that by necessity is pushing businesses towards the cloud. What are your experiences with regard to mobility?
Well, I think that just to pick up on that point about what the next generation of users is demanding, and I think that's going to find its way into the boardroom, which is going to have a knock-on effect in sort of business drivers and the business demand for adopting cloud service. We've spoken about the sort of the rapid access to these applications, but I also think that there's going to be a paradigm shift in expectations around users, and also that it's going to have a knock-on effect with the technology that's being provisioned to support that. We're going to see ISVs adopting cloud services and wanting infrastructure as platform services to be able to publish their new mobile applications, and users are going to expect things turned on a dime.
Yeah, we're seeing our last 2 years annual CIO conference. We've seen a strong trend from the CIOs that these are large multinational corporations. Certainly access to tablets and how to use tablets is very top of mind, and that's largely driven by the boardroom that Stuart mentioned. You know, people using the technology at home, wanting access to it very quickly at work.
You've got to realise what people mean by cloud services. With their first entry into it, it's going to be things like Gmail, like Twitter, like Facebook. They're using these services on their devices, whether it's a smartphone, whether it's a tablet. And they're bringing that into the office, and I think we're probably going to see much more. You're probably already seeing it, Miles, about the people looking now demanding bring your own devices, applications, setups, and this is the way they want to work, and that's going to cause some headache for CIOs. But that's the way that the users are driving that business now.
Yeah, completely agree. What I would also say is that users have an expectation of everything being always on now, whether that's the internal user, the external user. The old 9 to 5 is long gone. We're flexible working hours that see earlier starts, extended business days, with global trading. The user now expects their applications to be always on. And always on for infrastructure is fundamentally quite expensive because systems do need downtime for maintenance, upgrades, patching. Clouds can provide that always on environment.
So effectively, consumerisation can represent an opportunity for enterprise IT as well as a challenge.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I guess that the next logical point then would be something like hardware end of life, which provides a natural punctuation point at which to consider the cloud. Any takers on that one?
I think that's right. I think you'll often see that as a starting point where servers reach the end of their natural life, or it might be the end of a maintenance contract coming into fruition, and that's seen as an opportunity then as well. Do we have to do things the old way? We've done this the old way the last 5, 10, 15 years. It's a chance to look into the cloud, and as people have said already, that it's a chance you can dip your toe in the water by experimenting with different applications, with different processes, and that's a way to get into it. And I think it's a natural punctuation point at the end of a server's lifetime. It's certainly a clear indication this could be the way to go.
With hardware for the last 20 odd years, excuse me, you've had to over buy effectively too much capacity because you needed it to last 3 to 5 years. So you couldn't buy what you needed right now. You needed to be able to forward. You needed to buy a bigger box that you could upgrade as you went along the way. So that meant you had sunk investment that you got no ROI back on for probably 18 months until you started to consume some of that. And if that 18 months turned out to be 3, then you had a problem because you needed a forklift upgrade. So with the cloud, you don't need to do that.
And you're talking about servers who might have been running at 10-15% of their capacity as well.
Yep.
Yeah, and the capacity utilisation is one of the big benefits we've seen. Cisco moved their data centre infrastructure to a private cloud a couple of years ago, and utilisation has quadrupled. It's gone from 90% to 37% in that period. So with the effect of bringing the OPEX down significantly.
Yeah, the economics have changed significantly as well, and we get, to coin an old phrase, you get an opportunity now to right size. We haven't got to do that over investment and over capacity. We can actually buy what we need when we need it. So it's going to have a big effect on the finances of organisations, and they can look at transforming themselves into a sort of more of a service orientated, demand driven organisation.
So as well as, if you like, outsourcing the physical job of care and feeding, are there other benefits, for example, in reducing the procurement cycle so that you can actually start developing greater alignment between IT and the business and being more responsive to those demands?
Absolutely. I saw a CEO recently who explained to me he was introducing a service catalogue into the business, and he pretty much picked the burger chain style. He'd go on regular, large and super, where he had a couple of vCPUs, 4 gig of RAM, doubled that for large and doubled again for super. And therefore, when somebody came and said, I want to run a new application, my vendor has told me this is the spec of server, and he wants me to run it to my internal users. We could just slot it into one of those 3 menu options. So it was very easy. There's the price to cost, internal cost charging is very easy to do. So he was able to do that just using cloud providers' cloud standard service offerings.
Yeah, and service catalogue and the concept of services is a great way of introducing organisations to adopting other types of cloud service, whether they be software or platform, because they can consume those on a similar basis. There also, we can look for those are opportunities then to sort of identify where to start in terms of like the easy options, the quick wins, in terms of what sort of applications and services are going to be most appropriate for them in the cloud.
It's an interesting option there for department heads. They've got a completely new way of working. Their way of working previously is going to the IT department to provide them services. Now they've got to start thinking about what actually they need. And when you talk about internal chargeback, that's going to mean to people's budgets, because suddenly they might be consuming more than they've actually budgeted for, and what that means. So they need this. There's going to be a mindset alteration across the business, not just in the CIO's department, but actually across heads of departments who've got to get used to a new way of working.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a couple of other areas of business value aside from the economic ones, and I think Max brings in an interesting aspect there in terms of we're working with a number of customers who see the business head bringing their own cloud services in as actually something the IT department need to manage, and that is opening the door for the broad cloud discussion. because in some instances that can be viewed as introducing significant risk into the business, because no one really knows how much is being consumed and also how that's being secured and where the data integrity is being managed.
The IT department's no longer seen as a cost centre. It's a revenue generative part of the business, and CIOs want to be seen in that way. They want to be seen as that business enabler.
I spoke to someone the other day who was a global CIO, and I asked him what he saw his role as a CIO. That stands for Chief Investment Officer, because that was his role, was actually managing the investment that people made in technology.
And do you think we're now at that point where the general economic climate is less predictable, perhaps more volatile, and so the flexibility of cloud is starting to become more and more compelling for businesses?
Yes, absolutely. Particularly in that sort of first case that we spoke about, in terms of like launching new business applications, we don't know what the demand for that is going to be. This is a great way of being able to sort of contain those costs, low initial upfront investment, and then see how popular it becomes and how well it supports the business. And as the economy starts to drive, then obviously they've got a scalable type of infrastructure that they can draw upon in order to sort of fulfil that.
Very much so. Now, we've talked about hardware exploration, but what if it's the physical data centre itself that is starting to become uneconomical to maintain? Is that an opportunity, do you see, for cloud?
I think it's very much so. There's a case that data centres have reached the end of their natural life, and moving to a new data centre involves a lot of investment. It's the investment in real estate and actually the investment in provisioning that data centre, and also particularly in London there's the problem of capacity, whether the national grid can supply enough electricity. There's some data centres already in around the Canary Wharf that are actually running very up to the maximum capacity in terms of electricity. And I think you'll see a lot of people saying, well, now, do we need this data centre? Do we need a new data centre? That's a massive investment to make. Can we look at the cloud as another option?
Yeah, the era of the server hover is well and truly over. People don't feel the need to be able to dash into the other room and jump onto a server and be able to fix it. The CIO doesn't want to be burdened with UPS upgrades, air handling units upgrades, all those power concerns. He doesn't want to be a pseudo facilities manager.
No, and I think Max touched on a really interesting point with the electricity consumption. We've certainly seen with our Cisco's move to a cloud infra solution, a big drop in consumption of power, and I mean that's not just good for the OPEX budget. It's also extremely good for the planet. And many organisations today, include within their corporate social responsibility programme a lot of objectives and goals around how they're going to reduce the carbon footprint. And certainly cloud and using cloud capacity, is potentially a big contributor towards achieving those goals.
The data centre used to be about location. It used to need to be closer to the user. Business doesn't want that any longer. Business wants reliability, availability, accountability and security.
And a lot of business cases are now being supported on the fact that space can get re-provisioned as office space, so they can put highly valuable people in them, and then worry about the commodity services of actual infrastructure to sort of the boys that do it day in, day out.
That makes sense. And if the hardware itself still has reasonable longevity, then presumably that could be forklifted into a hosted environment.
Absolutely. We call it hybrid. We think it's the perfect way to go, because if you've already got existing platforms that are delivering, you've still got life left in them, both from capex, opex, and they're fit for purpose. Then you can plug them into cloud, start to migrate applications across as and when opportunities arise, OS upgrades, application upgrades. It reaches its natural point of needing a refresh.
Yeah, the thing is that obviously the technologies and tools to help with those sort of migrations, whether they're end-of-life physical shifts into a virtual environment or whether it's a physical to physical environment, the planning and the migration is pretty well matured now, so people have got a very good idea about what the risks are, and there are so many ways to sort of mitigate and get over those now, and speed the whole process up, so the business disruption becomes a lot less of a problem to them as well. And integration-wise, things are much more straightforward. So that hybrid between physical and the virtual world is not really becoming much of a barrier any longer.
No, and the certainly what we're seeing in the migration piece is the use of the hybrid solution does enable a planned migration rather than shut one data center down, move everything to another, which can be fairly extended. The hybrid solution allows a fairly elegant and risk-free migration.
And of course, the beauty of the hybrid as well is it can be as big as you want it. You can, if you want to really go for the cloud, you can actually move 80-90% of your services to the cloud. If you don't want to, you just want to experiment, you just dip your toe in the water. You can move 5%. You can do as much or as little as you want, and that's your planning and your opportunity then to take on board cloud services and see how far they go.
Yep.
Gentlemen, we've spoken quite a bit about hardware and applications, but what about major events such as organisational restructuring? Do you see those as triggers for cloud migration?
Yes, certainly M&A type activities, a merger between two companies. If one's on a cloud, it's far faster to integrate the two systems, because most cloud providers, certainly we call it a kiosk, and that allows existing systems to be brought in, virtualized, have appropriate elements added to them, and made cloud friendly, so they could put straight onto the cloud. So that would certainly allow a far faster migration, merging of two organisations' IT systems.
And demerging, just as many demergers as mergers. And similarly, if the architecture is built around a cloud, it's very easy to split out and separate the two businesses.
It makes it much more mobile and agile, and which is more adapted to be able to either collaborate more closely together or to diversify accordingly.
I mean, flexibility is the key driver of the cloud. People talk about financial savings, but actually flexibility is a much bigger driver nowadays.
So what we're saying then is effectively the cloud can help us to really help achieve full productivity a lot sooner where there is organisational upheaval and wider change. So we've looked at quite a few examples of how being attuned to the business environment can help that fabled alignment between IT and the business. What has been your experience of that? Are we starting to see this scenario actually panning out in practice? It's more than just a mantra.
It definitely is. If you look at surveys from people looking at cloud uptake, it's still very much the technologies decisions taken by the CIO, but increasingly you'll see CIO and perhaps the CFO or CEO having a say in it, and sometimes you'll see business heads having a say in it as well, moving without the CIO's say authority, but actually he being the driver. Perhaps the CEO or the CMO or the CFO is the main driver, and I think you'll see much more of that. People working much closely together, all the business heads coming together and making that decision.
Yeah, we've certainly seen with one of our cloud applications, WebEx, where the driver is often in the business, and then the application uptake is driven virally within the organisation very successfully in a very short period of time. But that business driven rather than IT.
We're also finding that it's becoming the first choice now. People are automatically looking for a cloud service to support their new business initiatives from day one, which I think is a far cry from how it has been over the last sort of few years. There was a lot of hype to begin with, and the usual sort of trough of disillusionment. And I think people are starting to become accepting of the fact that it's a lot more mainstream now, and they're starting to trust it a lot more than they used to, and they're starting to get their head around what the economics are and what it means to them as a business and the opportunities it brings.
Thank you. That concludes our panel discussion. We're now going to move on to some questions from our audience. So the first question I have here, we have an audience member who says, I'm ready for the cloud, but what should my first step be?
I think looking for the sort of the quick wins and the early opportunities, those that are going to give you the sort of the best and the fastest economic payback in them. People usually looking at things like email, or a lot of the other software as a service type offerings that there are now, as ways to sort of address the fact that they want to get into the cloud, understand what it means to them and running their business and their finances, and that's usually where they can then start to look at more infrastructure as a service type offerings to adopt it more mainstream.
I'd be very clear about what you're looking to achieve. Be clear about your business goals, be clear about your technology goals, and also be clear not just about what you're looking to achieve, but also the risk aspects of it, both positive and negative risks for moving to the cloud and not moving to the cloud. I
agree with that. It needs to be looked at as part of the whole IT strategy. There's no point in just saying, let's get into a bit of cloud. It needs to be completely taken into account. Whether I see lots of customers going down the virtual desktop route. Another consideration that needs to be taken into account.
Initially, because it's part of the whole business and IT strategy, really, is this what business aims is achieving, as well as the IT. And as I said earlier, it's really about business and IT working hand in hand on this.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. We have another question here. I have a preliminary meeting with my CEO. What are the 3 things I should tell him so he gets it? I'll probably only have 20 minutes. So elevator pitch, crib sheet, gentlemen.
Yeah, elevator crib, here we go. I'll start on the economics. What we've seen, and this is public business case material I'm happy to share, is we've seen overall TCO savings of 50%. That was made up of CapEx savings of around 35-37%, and OpEx savings between 55 and 60%.
We've got white papers on the website that confirm 54% savings as well. So, yeah, completely, the numbers tally with us.
It'll give you flexibility. It'll give you ways to do things much quicker than you've ever been doing before.
And I think the speed piece, the figures I've seen, and the figures we use internally within Cisco are from taking 3 months to bring an application, a server online, it now takes 90 minutes.
So do you see a sense of inevitability about this, that in order to evolve as quickly as external change, organisations really are going to look to this kind of model to keep pace?
Yeah, almost without a doubt. A number of years ago, people said they wouldn't do mobile banking or they wouldn't do internet banking, and now it becomes mainstream. I think cloud and those sort of services for IT and for business are a given, and it's just a case of when and how.
If you get about 15 years back, people say, what's the need of going on the internet? What's the need of having a website? And look how that's changed. I work for a publication called CloudPro. We wouldn't exist if we didn't believe this is the way forward. We're absolutely convinced that it's not a little trickle anymore. It's actually a big onrushing torrent going towards cloud.
I would agree with that. I mean, if we wind the clock back to 2008, we saw early adopters there. We saw cloud being used for test and dev systems because it was relatively low cost. 2009, we went live with our first cloud customers. 2010, with great expectations, thought this was going to be it. People weren't ready for it. There was still a lot of fear, uncertainty and doubt at that time. 2011 was great. 2011, people accepted it and actually thought cloud is now production ready, not just test and dev. 2012, as Stuart mentioned, it's the first choice. Anybody looking for any kind of managed applications, managed services, they want it on the cloud. They accept the cloud benefits.
Thank you very much to our panel, and thank you to our audience for attending. We hope you found today's discussions informative.
Other webinars are available to watch on demand on the SunGuard 2020 webinars website. The next webinar in the series is themed Self-Service versus Support. Thank you and goodbye.